What did the end of 2023 and the dawn of the new year bring? The main events in Ukraine, Russia, and beyond. This is what we're gonna talk about today. Hello there, I'm Elena. Welcome to my political channel, Enough of Propaganda. Please like, subscribe, write comments. This is how the algorithms of YouTube are working, and let's make the truth available for everyone. In this particular video, we will discuss several things. It's a major events happening in the end of the year 2023 in Ukraine, Russia, and other countries, and what is happening in the beginning of 2024. Ukraine's defensive strikes, Russia's strikes on Ukraine, and missile attacks and drone warfare. And we will talk about Russia's internal and external turmoil and uncover the dynamics of the beginning of 2024 and the global impact. I will start from the very beginning, from the talking about Russian Chief of General Staff of the Armed Forces, Gerasimov, and speculations about that one of the attacks of Ukraine killed the Russian General Gerasimov. Those rumors, I don't find them confirmed in any way. And this piece of video is from when Michael Naki also dig into this very deeply, and basically it's turned out to be false as far as we know now. Like, we don't see Gerasimov, but we don't see proofs of his death either. The channels who reported on it didn't name the source or anything like that. And the other sources who repeated it, basically I haven't seen proofs of that. And my channel is about telling the truth, and so far this is unconfirmed. And even according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, successful strike was made on the enemy's command post located near Sevastopol in Crimea, Russian-occupied Crimea. And Ukrainian armed forces also reporting hitting enemy's ammunition depots near the village of Pervomayskaya. But at the same time, when information appeared on the network claiming that Gerasimov was killed, but the head of the main intelligence directorate of Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Kirill Budanov, stated that there is no information confirming Gerasimov's liquidation. The events are happening in time, so in this point in time, I don't have confirmations of Gerasimov's death, and I presume him alive. And it's probably a good thing, because Gerasimov isn't a brilliant commander of any kind. He's so far didn't do anything smart in Ukraine, and it's a good thing for Ukraine, for the world, and even for Russia. So let's keep the stupid generals in power, and I wish him long life and a long prison sentence, as well as Michael Naki does, in the courts for his war crimes and whatever Russian army committed in Ukraine. So I really hope to see him on the prisoner's bench. And life sentence in prison would be even too mild for him. This is what I hope for this man. In general, in 2023, according to the Reporters Without Borders, throughout the year, 45 journalists were killed. In Russia, 28 journalists are in pretrial detention and prisons. This is kinda in the whole year. December 2023, Russia and Ukraine. On the night of the December 29th, Russian forces attacked Ukraine with missiles and kamikaze drones. There were casualties and destruction in Kiev, Lviv, Odessa, Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Zaporizhia. This is footage from Kiev, but Russia made a huge, massive attack on basically all of Ukraine, on different parts of it, as I said. And this was horrid attack. These are the results of shooting in front of New Year in Donetsk, Odessa, and Lviv. Overall, Ukrainian air defense managed to destroy 114 out of 158 airborne targets. According to the Ukrainian Air Force, Russia used almost all types of its available weaponry. As of January 4th, 2024, the information came, the freshest one I saw, at least 32 people have died and more than 130 have been injured. And after massive shelling by the Russian army, Russia some Russian people reacting in a normal way. For example, people in Moscow, they started to bring flowers to the monument of Lesia Ukrainka, a Ukrainian monument in Russia, in Moscow. And city residents bring flowers to the memorial after all major attacks to Ukraine. Because many Russians not supporting what Putin is doing, and this is how they protesting against it. Another big thing happened in December. It's when Ukrainian forces in Crimea, the Ukrainian armed forces attacked the Russian large landing ship Novocherkassk, and it was destroyed. I have a video about it. It's called The Naked Truth About the War in Ukraine. After Russia massively attacked Ukraine, on December 30th, Belgorod, Russian city of Belgorod, came under shelling. According to the latest data, 24 people were killed and more than 100 were injured. Residents were told they should take shelter, but some of them were sealed or locked. And this is a big surprise in Belgorod. And apparently the sirens went off only after everything was done and finished. And the same thing, they're showing that the shelters were locked, people trying to get in, and they couldn't. According to the Governor Gladkov, during the strike on Belgorod, 30 apartment buildings and 381 apartments, several private houses, and many cars were affected. This piece is from TV Rain. I'm not gonna show it all the details. It just in general, Russia is trying to pull narrative that, oh boy, Ukraine attacked the peaceful city of Belgorod. This is not true. First of all, it is not a retaliation as some news agencies reported. There is no retaliation on Russian part. Russia attacked Ukraine in 2014, continued that war, and came to full-scale invasion in 2022. Since then, for 2 years, Russia was bombing Ukrainian civilians indiscriminately and attacking Ukrainian army without any reasons, without saying that they declare any war on Ukraine or anything. And this is just a minor thing to compare what's happening in Ukraine, what Russia is doing to Ukraine. And if Russians are expected that the war not going to come to their place, they are very much mistaken. This is what's going to happen. It will continue happening because, first of all, Ukraine, if they have a basically good Western weapons, the Western people complaining, saying, please don't use our weapons on Russia, and Ukraine doesn't. So they're using old Soviet weapons, which is, of course, not precise, and this is what's happening. The more the countries from the West who is providing and helping Ukraine with some weapons to defend themselves will keep grabbing them by the hands and stopping them from responding with the proper weapons, this is what's going to happen. Second of all, Belgorod isn't a peaceful city. From Belgorod, from the airport of Belgorod, flying planes to bomb Ukraine. From Belgorod, missiles shelling Ukrainian peaceful cities and territories. And the army, but mostly peaceful cities. All attacks, many attacks on Ukrainian territory, killing civilians, indiscriminately bombing from Kharkov, bombing other cities in Ukraine, coming from Belgorod. In Belgorod, there are military targets, valid military targets, what is Ukraine is going after, and they will keep doing that. But apparently for Russians, this wasn't enough. And this is Belgorod, by the way, in Russian territory. This is where they're shooting to Ukraine from. On the next day, December 31st, which I want to underline that for all Soviet people from the USSR, for Russian people, New Year is a big deal. Huge deal. When the USSR was trying to destroy the religion in Russia, they're trying to get rid of Christmas and everything. Christmas was forbidden and so on. New Year became a big deal. It's way bigger than Christmas in here in the West, for example. And just at New Year's, basically, Russia attacked Ukraine again. Russian military attacked Ukraine with strike drones of the Shahed 136, 131 type, according to the General Staff of Ukrainian Armed Forces. And they attacked Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Mykolaiv, Khmelnytsky district. In Kharkiv, buildings in the city center were damaged and 28 people were injured. According to the local authorities, the city was attacked with missiles. In Kiev region, a critical infrastructure facility caught fire with no reported casualties. This is where the Kiev is. The missing Russian opposition leader Navalny was found, which was on the bright side of this year. This was basically one of the big bright events in the end of the year. But the attack on Ukraine was another horrible, horrible attack. Russia deliberately bombing civilians and deliberately bombing infrastructure, and Putin admitted to it. Another information on Poland, on that massive attack on December 29th, when Russia attacked Ukraine, Russian missile was in Polish airspace for about 3 minutes, during which it flew 100 kilometers into the country before returning to Ukraine. The missile was accompanied by air defense systems, and due to the incident, Polish President Andrzej Duda conveyed an emergency meeting with the military leadership. So Russian missiles, it's not the first time when they entering NATO country. So we are close to have a big problem here. So this is huge mass is Russia, and this tiny thing is Ukraine, who's standing against this huge monstrosity. What happened in the end of the year in Russia? Krasnoyarsk region had massive power outage, and even criminal case has been initiated about that. In Russian territory, Dagestan, in Makhachkala, people blocked the streets in a protest against the power outage. People took the streets the night before. There was no electricity in their homes for 2 days. And it's not just Makhachkala. In December was lots of power problems in several northern and eastern parts of Russia, where people actually have really cold weather, and they were left without power. The Russian government approved the abolition of duties on imported eggs due to active price problems in some regions. In some regions, a dozen eggs now cost more than 300 rubles, or 3.3 US dollars, or 4.4 Canadian dollars. And Russians were standing in lines, huge lines, and buying eggs, not by the 10 or by the dozen, just by one egg and so on. So Russia can't even produce its own eggs. And according to Russian economist Milov, basically everything what necessary to produce the eggs, from the antibiotics and supplements to the chickens and so on, it's all foreign. And it's affected by the sanctions, by the way. And I remember those lines since the USSR time. I remember when we were standing in line for in Gorbachev times for the sugar for about 4 days in line. I remember that very well. Putin brought it back to Russia. But forgot about the eggs. The most expensive item in Russia in 2023 was garlic, of all things. Its price rose by 78%, or 167 rubles per kilogram, according to the Sirena news and prices today. Eggs, which due to the rise of prices and excitement began to be sold individually, are only in the middle of the list. The prices on some vegetables and meat have risen much more. This is the prices for the meat and everything. So, and Russian people have very little salary, pensioners hardly surviving. Meanwhile, for the performance of a single actor, which Putin inexplicably calls the Russian presidential election, the Central Election Commission will spend more than 33 billion rubles, or 363 million of US dollars. The number of financial pyramids and Ponzi schemes in Russia reached a historical maximum due to increased interest in investments and the search for additional sources of income. In St. Petersburg, 20,000 cameras with artificial intelligence have been installed. So Russia gonna spy even more on its people. This was the main events in the end of the 2023. Now let's talk about 2024. In particular, January 1st and pre-New Year weekend. The 2024 started with horrible things as well. An earthquake, a magnitude 7.6 earthquake occurred in January 1st in Japan, and Noto Peninsula and Ishikawa Prefecture, and in the adjacent area of central Japan. Many buildings were destroyed and tens of thousands of homes were left without electricity. As of January 3rd, 2024, the number of deaths due to the earthquake in Japan has risen to 62 people. And another earthquakes happens in some other areas of Japan. I feel very sorry for people in Japan. I visited Japan myself, and I know how prepared are they, and still, it's just terrible. Like, I feel very, very sorry for the people in Japan. And in Moscow and St. Petersburg, in Russia, New Year's Eve wasn't peaceful for migrants, for people who came to Russia for work and everything else. There was raids on them, and it took place right on New Year's night. Law enforcement agencies mass detained migrants, checked their documents, and took them into the police station. Some of them probably already in Ukraine, fighting. January 2nd wasn't even better. Russia attacked Ukraine again, and Russian forces launched a missile strike on Ukraine. 5 people died, 127 were injured. On the night of January 2nd, Ukraine was attacked by 35 Shahed-type drones. All of them, according to the Ukrainian armed forces, were shot down. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko reported the drone debris falling in several city areas. An air raid was declared across Ukraine, when Kyiv and Kharkiv, among other cities, coming under attack. And I have friends in Kyiv and in Kharkiv. And all these cities get attacked again. These are the results of that attack, and apartment building get burned, and lots of other things happened. Largest prisoner exchange took place between Russia and Ukraine. In Russia, 248 Russian military personnel returned as a result of a complex negotiation process, so-called. The exchange was confirmed by Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. According to him, Kyiv returned more than 200 people, both military and civilians. And he published a video with returning prisoners. This is not that video, but it's one of the videos on Guardian. And Ukrainians are happy to see their people back. Russians doesn't care. Whatever I see in video about Russians exchange, nobody greeting them like they greeting Ukrainians. Nobody care. Nobody making big deal out of it. Russia hiding it, that they were captured in the first place. In Russia, Voronezh Oblast, Voronezh region, a Russian missile fell on the village of Petropavlovka in Voronezh Oblast. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported an emergency release of aviation munition occurred over Petropavlovka. According to Ukrainian media, it was an X-101/555 missile launched from aircraft towards Ukraine. Some residential buildings were destroyed, leaving a large crater on the ground. 4 people were injured due to the fall of the Russian missile in Voronezh Oblast, and authorities promised to rebuild the damaged houses. Petropavlovka is located 150 kilometers from Ukrainian border. Starting the aggressive war, eventually the war is coming to your territory. This is what is happening. And despite Russian Z propagandists were saying at first it was Ukraine, no. Russian Ministry of Defense admitted it was Russia. And that's not all. Just now, it's second, exactly the same thing occurred in different places. So it's gonna only continue. Belgorod came under shelling another time. This is an older video, but the shelters were closed again. And the governor of Belgorod reported 1 person killed due to shelling and 11 other injured. And as you can see, the shelters were locked and now they locked again. Russians didn't learn anything. I'm jumping a bit ahead and saying that Russian basically cities, including Moscow region, now freezing in the cold weather. But on 3rd of January, Putin created exhibition, large exhibition, Russia at VDNH happened. More than 5 billion rubles, 55 million of US dollars from various budget levels were spent on the exhibition representing changes in the country during Putin's rule. Of course, it's all for the better. Russia is one of the main elements of Putin's presidential campaign, which have never included such large projects before. Of course, he has to show Russians how much better they started to live with Putin. Meanwhile, they freezing to death in their houses and apartments. Right in Moscow region, not even in the Siberia or anything. And Russia giving away citizenship. And taking away citizenship. So, President of Russia, Putin, give permission to foreigners who is volunteering to be serving Russian army to become Russian citizens. And also to their family members. And at the same time, he even basically inviting the people who has criminal records and even who committed the crime and they supposed to be charged by their countries to go to Russia and go to Russian army. At the same time, Putin's taking away citizenship from some people. In Russia, the first decision on the termination of acquired citizenship under the new law has been made. The decision to deprive citizenship was made in relation to two young men, aged 21 and 24, for evading military registration, so they didn't want to serve in the Russian army. And also citizenship was revoked from two men for illegal drug trafficking. So on one hand, Putin giving people, criminals, Russian citizenship, and at the same time he taking away Russian citizenship from people who doesn't want to go into his aggressive war in Ukraine to murder people there. On January 4th and 3rd, basically shelling was continuous. Russia was striking at Kharkiv, causing destructions of educational institutions, for example. Shelling continues in Belgorod region, which is Russian Federation. In Russia, right in Moscow, more than 20 high-rise buildings were left without heating and light at minus 27 Celsius. And a fire at the substation caused difficulties in extinguishing it. In the regions across Russia, abnormal frosts and utility accidents occurred. Houses in St. Petersburg, Leningrad Oblast, which is St. Petersburg region, Moscow and other cities were left without heating at minus 30 Celsius. In Vladimir Oblast, near Moscow, the Swallow train, called Swallow, from Nizhny Novgorod to Moscow, which that train was going from this Nizhny Novgorod to Moscow. And in between, in Vladimir, it was stuck for 2.5 hours due to a power loss. Passengers complained about the absence of electricity and heating. They were crammed into 3 rail cars and some people fainted. In Ukraine, in Russian annexed Crimea, in Saki district, the strikes were made on military unit, and movement on Crimean bridge was blocked. And also it was hit, the airport was hit by Ukrainians. Now let's jump to the other side of the map. On January 5th, North Korea conducted artillery shelling towards South Korea, towards islands of South Korea, firing about 200 shells. And South Korea tried to evacuate people from one of the islands North Korea attacked. This is a channel World Hawk Defense. The proofs came out that in attack of January 2nd on Kharkiv, Russia used North Korean missiles, and the evidence of that has been found. Putin's behavior, Putin's aggressive war in Ukraine, and the weakness of some Western countries with providing assistance to Ukraine in time emboldened every little dictator all over the planet. So we will see more of this. So now North Korea brave enough try to make problems and attack South Korea. Israel get hit. Venezuela is thinking of attacking a neighbor. What is next? We need to help Ukraine, and fast. On January 6th, leader of Chechnya, Kadyrov, basically blackmailed the world. He has offered the United States to lift sanctions on his mother, daughters, and horses in exchange for Ukrainian prisoners of war. And he is calling it ethnic trolling. This is called blackmail, by the way. It's really extortion and blackmail. Jake Bro on his channel has a good information on that. I would recommend to watch his channel and this particular video in general. And he's talking also about Scott Ritter, which apparently a convicted pedophile who went to Chechnya and giving the murderer and bad guy Kadyrov some sort of a legitimacy in his opinion and so on. This is outright disgusting. This is called blackmail. And we shouldn't follow that. We shouldn't agree on the blackmail and so on. And soon Putin will run out of money to pay Kadyrov off to pretend to be a part of Russian Federation. And it's highly likely Chechnya will split off from Russia. I hope they will be smart enough to remove Kadyrov from power and have enough of will of people to get rid of Kadyrov and his bandits, who didn't only TikTok warriors and so on, but they hold Chechnya in a stronghold, and basically there is no law in Chechnya. If in Russia there is no law, in Chechnya even worse. the torture, the imprisonment of people, and a whole bunch of other things happening there. And I'll probably make about this a separate video. In Russia, the wives of the mobilized people held protests in Moscow and St. Petersburg, demanding the return of their loved ones and reminding the overfed crowd about the war in the country. I wish they protested more actively about the war in general. That's why their husbands and sons wouldn't ended up on the war anyway. January 7th is a Russian Orthodox Christmas. What Russia did? Russia attacked Ukraine again. Surprise, surprise. And the attack was Kharkiv, Khmelnytskaya region, Zaporozhye, Kryvyi Rih, and drones and missiles were used, and some Russian planes flew from Murmansk region. According to Armed Forces of Ukraine, 21 out of 28 drones were shot down. So this is how Russia is celebrating Orthodox Christmas. Everybody's so religious in Russia these days. Russian Patriarch Kirill, which is former FSB agent Gundyaev, suggested welcoming back those who left Russia, but only if they return with a sense of repentance, acknowledging their guilt. If somebody who need to acknowledge his guilt is Patriarch Kirill himself, and all these so Christian Russians who is doing this to Ukrainians. Meanwhile, Belgorod started to evacuate people and evacuate children because, Ukraine is shooting at Belgorod now all of a sudden. If Putin wouldn't start the war in Ukraine, nobody would be shooting at Belgorod. Fifth day in Russia, people even in Moscow region without heat, many of them without electricity and water, and authorities are too busy fighting the war in Ukraine than to fix the pipes so people didn't freeze in their own apartments, which is in Russia temperature was minus 27, minus 26 lately, up to minus 30 in some places, and more minus temperatures in other parts of Russia. But this is Moscow region we're talking about, it's not Siberia. This is footage from World Hawk Defense, but it's not from Moscow, I don't think. But nevertheless, instead of fixing pipes and actually thinking about Russia, Putin is fighting aggressive war in Ukraine. And it's only gonna get worse after that. On Russian Orthodox Christmas Eve, the murderers of Russian people, Putin, had a meeting with the families, a few families, of those people who were killed in his war in Ukraine. And the poor people had to sit and endure his speech. Kinda reminds me Stalin when he was appearing, carrying on a little girl with a bouquet of flowers. Meanwhile, his henchmen tortured and killed her parents. And this is exactly what Putin does. These poor children wouldn't see their father again. And this guy one of some sort of a military school. In childhood. He's in the military school already. So he will get killed in the next war Putin will start. And another family with poor children, who Putin murdered their relatives. Their father perhaps. And they had to sit with him in the same room and listen to his blah 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 about how important family is and how Russian authorities are with them and together with them. And as some people on Twitter pointed out, like, look at that, where Putin is sitting. He's sitting on a separate carpet from everybody else. Why is that? It's because in case somebody decided to attack, even if they're sitting on a big distance from Putin, he could be easily pulled in by the FSB, for example, and the door could be closed. So he would be sheltered from attack of the people. That's how much he's scared of people. And the priest sitting here. This just so hypocritical and so insanely disgusting, I can't even express how much. So this guy murdered their fathers and invited them to talk to them and saying how much family is important. This is just outright disgusting. These are all the news I wanted to comment at this point. Talk about the ending of 2023 and the beginning of 2024. The war in Ukraine still continues, and the murderous dictator who started this war and continuing this war still alive and well by the looks of it. So if we don't want our sons fighting in the war, So far, Ukraine asking is just for the weapons and weapons only. We have to help Ukraine. Please help Ukraine. Help them to stop Putin and prevent from a whole bunch of little fires he will organize in our countries and all around the world. Thank you for watching. Please learn the truth and stay informed. Have a great day and hopefully better the rest of the year. Thank you and see you later.